A wonderful good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a distinct pleasure to welcome you all to this session on innovative financing structures in support of Africa's energy transition, with a particular opportunity to showcase some of the work undertaken by the bank's Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, or in short, as we call it, SEFA. So I'm delighted to see so many of you with us this morning, and I'm sure it's going to be an exciting hour and a half of conversation around what works, what doesn't work, a conversation around concrete project opportunities, and a conversation where we can sort of try to see how can we achieve the scale that is required, taking into account that only a fraction of renewable energy investments globally actually come to Africa, despite the tremendous potential that the continent possesses. My name is Daniel Schroth. I'm the Director for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency at the African Development Bank, and I have the pleasure to facilitate the session this morning. SEFA has featured in a number of the previous editions of the Africa Investment Forum. We had a number of transactions that were presented from the Facility of Energy Inclusion, to the cross-boundary energy access platform, to the first kind of fund in the clean cooking space, Spark Plus. But this is the first time really that we will have a dedicated, I would say large boardroom here in the plenary focused on some of the work that has been undertaken with partners on the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa. It is a partnership because we have 10 donors until last week contributing to SEFA, several of whom are in the audience, and for example, Richard Nelson from Power Africa sitting here in the front row, but several others also in the audience. And as of last week, I'm pleased to announce that we have an 11th donor with Japan, who has joined the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa with a particular focus on supporting project preparation work in relation to the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa. So that's fantastic news. The partnership is growing. The demands are huge. Let's get it done collectively. The session today will be structured in 3 parts. We will be starting with opening remarks from the Vice President for Power, Energy, Climate Change and Green Growth. This will be followed by a presentation on what is SEFA about, what is the structure, what are the financing instruments, what are some of the examples of innovative transactions that have been supported over the last couple of years. We will then move into a panel conversation with some key partners around project finance structures and the role that blended finance has played over the last couple of years. We will also use this opportunity to launch the updated handbook on project financing structures, on which we've worked jointly with Power Africa, with the Commercial Law Development Program, and the African Legal Support Facility. And finally, and particularly excited about this last part, because we will be showcasing 3 concrete pipeline projects on which SEFA is working at the moment. One of which is the AIF24 Climate Transition Fund, a 200 million platform to advance sustainable infrastructure and energy transition projects in Nigeria and West Africa. And what is particularly exciting about the AIF24 fund is that it's focusing on leveraging capital from institutional investors in Nigeria, in particular Nigerian pension funds, institutional investors. From the SEFA side, we are looking of coming in with a 10 million junior tranche that will help to anchor those sort of more commercially oriented investors. The second project that will be presented in more detail is one that we've been working on for a number of years. It's the Moi Power Metrogrids project in the Democratic Republic of Congo, recognizing that more than 50% of the energy access deficit in Africa will have to come through decentralized energy access solutions. That's particularly relevant in a country such as DRC, and the Moi Power Metrogrids project is a very innovative structure, actually focusing on 3 large cities that don't have a connection at the moment, using and relying mainly on diesel fuel-powered power generation. And last but not least, also excited that we will be having Burn Manufacturing, which is a leader in clean cooking solutions in Africa present their expansion plans. We have been supporting Burn through the Spark Plus Africa Fund already, but we're also at the moment working on a carbon pre-financing structure that will help Burn roll out clean cook stoves in additional countries. So it will be exciting to see those 3 concrete opportunities presented this morning, and we will be inviting from the audience your comments, your questions, but also any indications that you can make in terms of interest on partnering around those opportunities. So without further ado, it's now my distinct pleasure to invite Dr. Kevin Karayuki, who's the Vice President for Power, Energy, Climate Change and Green Growth at the African Development Bank. Please give him a warm round of applause.
Thanks, Daniel. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed my pleasure to welcome you all to this session on the role of innovative financing structures in support of Africa's energy transition here at the Africa Investment Forum 2024. Today's session comes at a critical juncture with close to 600 million people in Africa still lacking access to electricity and close to 1 billion people without access to clean cooking solutions. Yet, Africa, despite being blessed with abundant renewable energy resources, renewable energy investments into Africa are insignificant in the bigger picture. A position that was confirmed by the fact that approximately 2.8 of the 2.8 trillion invested in renewables globally between 2000 and 2020, Africa accounted for only 2%. Financing at scale is therefore urgently needed to accelerate access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy while maintaining a low-carbon development trajectory, particularly through investments that deliver high social impact in rural and peri-urban areas. The African Development Bank is fully committed to harnessing Africa's renewable energy potential and scaling up energy access. In this regard, our investment portfolio is increasingly clean, with over 87% proportion of renewables since 2016, as we continue to grow our toolkit of instruments that are designed to crowd in private sector investors and tap into capital markets for financing of renewable energy investments. In this regard, we acknowledge that larger concessional finance flows are needed to catalyze the billions of investments required, including from domestic financial markets. We are particularly proud in this regard of the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, our flagship blended finance facility, for the standout role it is playing in catalyzing commercial investments. You may wonder why I say this, but for example, last year, by using innovative products, CEFA literally saved important projects, such as Egypt's 200 megawatt Komombo project, Komombo, and Tunisia's 100 megawatt Kairouan solar power projects from unraveling amid steep EPC price increases occasioned by supply chain disruptions caused by COVID-19 and geopolitical events around the world. In a nutshell, by employing instruments such as junior equity, concessional loans, and grants, CEFA is uniquely placed to address challenges such as the high cost of capital, limited access to long-term financing, and risks associated with emerging technologies and new business models. So what have we been doing? To date, CEFA has committed over 300 million in more than 100 projects, which are expected to deliver 6 gigawatts of new renewable generation capacity that can power up to 12 million new connections by 2030, thereby confirming CEFA's centrality in addressing Africa's energy deficit. This is, however, a small portion or fraction of the continent's needs. Africa targets to increase its renewable energy generation capacity from 56 gigawatts in 2023 to 300 gigawatts by 2030, according to last year's Nairobi Declaration at the end of the Africa Climate Summit. Concerted efforts by all stakeholders, that is governments, the private sector, the financial sector, and civil society, etc., are therefore paramount, which is why we have today assembled an action-oriented panel of CEFA partners to interrogate how we can collectively do more to further entrench Africa's low-carbon development trajectory, or in contemporary lingua, support Africa's energy transition. This is also why the African Development Bank, in collaboration with the World Bank, launched Mission 300, a bold initiative that seeks to provide electricity access to an additional 300 million people in Africa by 2030. In this regard, an important milestone in the Mission 300 journey is the Africa Energy Summit, which will be held in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, on the 28th of January 2025. The summit will convene heads of states and governments, ministers, international and regional organizations, and other partners, including the private sector, to agree and sign on a common set of reform actions that are required to support Africa's overall objective of achieving universal access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy by 2030, in accordance with the UN SDG number 7 and Africa Union's Agenda 2063. Furthermore, 15 countries will be expected to sign country-specific energy compacts that are being co-developed by each pilot country together with the African Development Bank and the World Bank, with inputs from other relevant stakeholders, thus confirming the political ownership of the energy compacts, which is absolutely essential for the success of Mission 300. In closing, I encourage you all to actively engage in today's workshop that seeks to further entrench Africa's low-carbon development trajectory. Together, let's translate ambition into tangible actions and harness the transformative potential of clean energy for the benefit of millions of Africans. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice President, for those inspiring remarks and indeed also highlighting the bold commitment from both the World Bank Group and ourselves to provide access to 300 million Africans by 2030, or as it's called now, M300. And we clearly see from our side CEFA as being one of the key delivery vehicles, particularly on the private sector ambition related to M300. It's my pleasure now to invite my colleague João Cunha, the manager of the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, to provide a little bit more granular detail around the structure of CEFA and what CEFA has been doing and is doing going forward. João, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and it's a pleasure to be here and to see all of you. Hope you're keen to learn a bit more about CEFA. I think for those who have been following CEFA, you'll know that our core mandate has always been to unlock and catalyze more private investments in renewables and energy access. Let me see if this is working. I will need some support here to shift the slides. All right, yes. Very good. So yes, I'll give you a little bit about what CEFA is, where CEFA is now in a nutshell, because there is a lot to unpack when you talk about a facility that has grown immensely over the last 12 years. CEFA's mandate is perfectly aligned with M300, as the Vice President just mentioned, and our overarching goal or objective is SDG 7. It's universal energy access. So we're very much driven by the number of connections and the impact in the ground that we are able to deliver. So we know that CEFA is the flagship blended finance facility of the African Development Bank, and it's currently being deployed as its key blended finance platform for the energy transition. Our current capitalization stands at $550 million from 10 generous donors, and we expect to see more commitments in incoming weeks, in fact. And since 2020, and I guess 2020 is a sort of a big milestone. Up until 2019, we were operating primarily as a technical assistance facility, doing small TA grants, either for project preparation or for enabling environments. Since 2020, we've been operating as an investment facility, in addition to our TA mandates. But not any investments, catalytic investments, and I'll unpack that in a moment. But as part of our strategy, we have three thematic areas. The first one, green base load, is focused primarily on the utility scale side of the power sector in Africa. It's really about accelerating deployment and penetration of renewable energy solutions, but those that bring flexibility and stability to modern power systems. So we want, through that pillar, to decarbonize, to provide alternatives to fossil fuels. The second pillar of our strategy is mainly focused on access, and under that we have a very strong focus on green mini-grids. And this is really about delivering rural and peri-urban infrastructure, small isolated grids, but hopefully this could provide a stepping stone to the grid eventually if the grid arrives. Otherwise, it should be an alternative to the conventional grids, but obviously powered by renewables. Finally, energy efficiency, the third sort of leg of our strategy. I have to say energy efficiency has historically been sort of neglected or not received the attention that it is due, especially in a world where the power systems will be primarily run with renewable energy. Here we're looking primarily at appliances businesses, solar home systems, clean cooking. We're starting to look at e-mobility. So these are the three themes. The scope is very clear. We have upstream supports. We're there to close viability gaps, and we're there to de-risk investors. Moving quickly through our toolbox of catalytic financing instruments. Two families, technical assistance. We're talking about grants and reimbursable grants, either for project preparation or working with the private sector or working with governments in program design and addressing some of the enabling environment bottlenecks, but really we want to be sort of as focused as possible in bringing projects and developing the pipeline for the continent. And then we have our concessional investment window here. We also have quite a wide suite of products, primarily organized around grants, concessional loans, and junior equity. We have a strong focus on innovative financing structures, and I'll speak a little bit about that in a moment. But some of the examples include, grant-based instruments to close viability gaps, concessional debt in project finance structures, and junior equity in investment funds. AIF is a lot about bringing projects to bankability, mobilizing financing. We have an holistic approach to bankability through our broad range of instruments and products. I would probably organize this under three sort of, three types of interventions. One is around TA programs, and these are usually thematic and they're regional in scope. So rather than doing the small TA grant here and there, now we operate through programmatic approaches, and we try to deploy more sort of impact-oriented technical assistance activities. The second part is around capitalizing innovative investment funds and platforms, helping them raise, mobilize capital primarily from private investors. And then through this financial intermediation play, channel more capital into a lot of the smaller projects, a lot of the smaller businesses, those kinds of projects that normally AFDB is not able to reach on a direct basis, but is able to operate through such intermediaries. Finally, closing viability gaps. I think the President mentioned, the Vice President mentioned a few notable examples where we came into the rescue during COVID, projects that were experiencing cost escalations and supply chain disruptions, and we were able to come in with highly concessional instruments to close viability gaps and bring these projects to fruition. Some examples of our multi-country technical assistance programs. So we have the Africa Energy Transition Catalyst, working with a number of countries to help design their energy transition plans. But obviously, below that, there is a strong focus in helping them prepare projects, either for PPPs or private sector. We have the African Mini Grids Acceleration Program, which is about supporting countries in developing bankable mini-grid programs to involve the private sector. And we have also a very exciting one, which is the Hydropower Modernization Program. And this is really about bringing an aging fleet of hydro assets across the continent to the 21st century, hybridizing them with wind and solar, bringing the latest digital technologies, refurbishing the turbines. So this is a very interesting program that is being rolled out as we speak. Quickly on the financing side, or the financing instrument side, some examples of closing viability gaps using concessional debt. We have the hydropower project in Gabon, a project that was competing with cheaper gas-fired alternatives, and we were able to bring down the tariff with our intervention to make it more competitive and hopefully help the country scale up its hydro potential and not go down the gas-fired route, although you'll probably need a little bit of both in the mix. Two other solar projects, Zambia Ilute, this is quite innovative with an intermediary off-taker, Africa Green Co. This is a semi-merchant power plant. Our concessional loan has helped in absorb some of the market price uncertainty, and in Kairouan, again, that's a project that was suffering with supply chain disruptions and cost escalations during COVID, and we helped support. On the funds, or on the equity side, we've invested in a number of funds, junior tranches, and again, this is to really provide downside protection to more senior, more commercial, more conservative investors, but also some element of return enhancement, boosting the upside, especially because these are funds that are first of a kind in their own right. They're targeting nascent segments of the market where there's limited investor appetite. We're helping them raise capital, and all of these here have done really well in terms of capital raising. We'll hear more about, for example, the Facility for Energy Inclusion and Africa Go Green Front from Signum. Just as we wrap up, I wanted to show you how successful we've been in terms of capital deployment. So the bottom diagram shows our annual sort of volume of funding deployed. And in 2024, we're looking at deploying over $100 million to the 14 projects. If you see in 2021, we did 30 million. And in terms of cumulative rate, as VP mentioned, we've already deployed north of $300 million in the last 5 years. We expect to have a record year in 2024, and we're looking at a very healthy pipeline in 2025. Hopefully, our donors will continue supporting us moving forward so that we can continue delivering impact. Again, just very briefly, this is what we expect to achieve from our current portfolio of projects. Close to 6 gigawatts of power, close to 12 million connections, and catalytic impact of circa $15 billion, which is quite a lot. These are generous donors. We'll be onboarding a few more by the end of the year. I won't just disclose that now. Maybe Daniel, you can announce that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Joar, for that succinct yet very clear presentation. Indeed, I highlighted that Japan just joined last week, and indeed we hope to onboard also the government of France before the end of the year, hopefully. It's now my pleasure to invite the first set of panelists to the floor, starting with Maud Vallet, who's the Division Manager and Head of Operations at the African Legal Support Facility. Please give her a warm round of applause. Secondly, I'd like to invite Richard Nelson, who's the coordinator of US lead initiative Power Africa and a close partner for many, many years. Thirdly, I would like to invite Clemens Kalije, who's the CEO of Signum Capital, bringing fund and private sector perspective to this conversation. Please also welcome him on the floor. And last but not least, I'd like to also invite Kenyon Weaver, who's Senior Counsel at the Commercial Law Development Program, CLDP. So we will be, I'm sort of transition here to join the panelists. Okay, it works, fantastic. Yes, that's more comfortable than standing. Well, we're going to have a conversation around the role of blended finance in project finance structures. But before we enter into the conversation, I would like to invite Kenyon actually to very briefly present the second edition of the Understanding Power Project Financing Handbook, on which we have worked collaboratively as partners here on the floor. And that's a very insightful publication. So Kenyon, maybe you can sort of just come up front here, showcase a little bit what the second edition is about, and then we can talk about it subsequently. So if we can put on the slides, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel, and wonderful to be here and to have this opportunity to really launch what has been an innovative partnership, the theme for this year's Africa Investment Forum. This is a great example of an innovative partnership, our second edition of the Understanding Power Project Financing. And we have a set of slides, and I can explain why it really is a partnership to start off. Do we have the PowerPoint? And that is that it is a true collaboration. This book, and I've got a colleague and actually one of the co-authors of this book who has copies available and will be distributing them. It is sponsored and funded by our USAID Power Africa, our partner and funder, and it is a book that draws on a long-standing partnership and collaboration with the Africa Legal Support Facility, which we are so grateful to be with and to have worked with for so long, and really has all of the institutional partners you can see here that are a part of this of these solutions. And I just have 3 slides. Again, let's see which way to point this. Figure out which way. Oh, thank you. Just to introduce briefly, this is not the only book in the series. We actually have 7 dedicated to power. Again, all underwritten, all sponsored by USAID Power Africa, and all collaborative. This is the second edition of one that came out in 2016, but it joins Understanding Energy Storage. There's one on power purchase agreements, transmission, and procurement. And it's really meant to establish a common understanding of best practices around successful power project development. These books are cooperatively, collaboratively written and edited. They have co-authors, about 12 to 15 per book, and they draw from all the different actors, key actors in the ecosystem. And you can see here, it's quite a bit of time and quite a bit of effort that goes into it, but they've been, we think, a great success. What's in this one? Well, what's in this one is not just an update from the 2016 version, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but it's a look at what's changed with the energy gap, the rise of the type of sovereign debt and where that has constrained the ability to guarantee, but not just what the problems are, what some of the solutions are. In fact, it draws upon the examples like Joao just mentioned, this SEFA and others. And so it looks at sort of what are some of today's existing and emerging financing options for power projects, what are the trade-offs for each one of those. It looks at also just how the energy transition is going to continue to drive potential solutions to meet the challenge for 300M, as we're calling it. And finally, this is the QR code. It is free. These are freely available. Most of our copies are actually online, downloaded online, unsurprisingly, but we brought 100 of these from Washington, D.C., so you're welcome to one, and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you, Daniel.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kenyon. Please, big round of applause, and please make use of this publication. I think the Understanding Handbook series has been an extremely useful tool for many people interested in the power sector over the years. Let me go straight into the conversation and maybe start with Maud over there from the African Legal Support Facility. This is obviously an update of a handbook, as was highlighted, published the first time in 2016. That's 8 years ago. There's obviously been quite some change. So maybe from your perspective, from what you've been seeing from the ALSF side and the legal perspective, of course, what has been some of the major changes in power financing, project finance structures, and also sort of what is sort of the role that you see kind of blended finance has sort of increasingly played over the last couple of years?
Thank you very much. First of all, it's a great pleasure to be here today. Thank you to SEFA to have invited the LSF today. If you allow me, before I respond to the questions, I would like to say maybe to do a very short presentation of DLSF, just for who don't know what is the LSF. So the LSF, the African Legal Support Facility, it's an international organization that was established and which is hosted by the African Development Bank in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. So what do? We assist African governments to structure and negotiate complex commercial transactions in 4 main sectors: infrastructures, PPPs, energy, of course, sovereign debt, and extractive and natural resources. I will not go further because we don't have time, but if you want to know more about the LSF, please do not hesitate to ask later after this panel. So the major changes that we have noticed at the LSF over the last decade, 8 years decade, the first one is probably the shift toward renewable. Over the past decades, we really witnessed a significant increase in renewable energy investments. Solar and wind projects, for instance, have gained a lot of tractions as countries aim to meet climate goals and expand energy access. There has been a noticeable shift from purely government-funded large energy projects to public-private partnerships and IPPs. This has opened doors for private capital to play a larger role. The second major change we can think about is the increased focus on climate finance. We have seen the rise of climate-focused funds and global commitments, such as those under the Paris Agreement, which have introduced new sources of financing, specifically tied to low-carbon energy solutions. Multilateral Development Bank and international donors have restructured their financing tools to emphasize climate-friendly projects. And finally, a third major change that we have noticed at the LSF is the emergence of regional energy markets. So more recently, we have seen the development and strengthening of cross-border energy trade and regional power pools. And the new Understanding Power Project Financing Handbook speaks about some of the innovative structures that are currently being tested and that use the regional market as a backstop to improve the bankability of projects. Maybe now to respond to the question on how blended finance has changed the approach to bankability. As we know, blended finance combines concessional funding from governments, development bank, and other donors with commercial investment. This structure helps de-risk projects by addressing concerns like political instability, market volatility, or high upfront cost. Blended finance has been instrumental in the shift towards renewable energy because it is more adapted to small scale projects or innovative technologies that might otherwise struggle to secure funding due to perceived risk. Blended finance also helps bridge financing gaps for first-of-a-kind projects for a country, and this will pave the way for scaling up. Finally, blended financing makes bankability not just about financial returns. It is about ensuring projects can operate sustainably over time. The funding will often include funding for capacity building, training, regulatory support, and this is something the ALSF assists a lot with, to ensure the long-term success of a project. This is why facilities like ALSF and CEFA are a great instrument of blended finance to significantly increase the viability prospect of projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maud, for those aspects and sort of highlighting some of the emerging trends that you have sort of seen over the last couple of years. Let me bring in Richard, because Power Africa has obviously been financing, or is financing this handbook series, but it's also been a staunch supporter of the African Development Bank and the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa more specifically over the last couple of years. In fact, I remember it was one of the very first investments Power Africa did when it was launched, with the second donor joining CEFA back in 2013. So it's a long-standing partnership that we have. But maybe you can sort of give a little bit your perspective around the partnership on this handbook, sort of the importance of innovative financing structures, and also sort of how this can sort of be used as a tool to advance more project finance deals in the renewable energy space in Africa. Richard, you have the floor.
No, thank you very much, Daniel, and again, thank you for having us today. My colleague Kenyon did a great job introducing the revised, updated handbook, and I'll just put another plug in. Make sure you get your copy today before you leave the room. But if you have limited space in your bags, you can also access them online. They are available in English and French. I'm not sure if this one has been translated yet, but it's coming. But the old version is there. Just to state a little bit of background on this, I'm not sure if you know how to do this. We call them book sprints, and CLDP does a great job of leading this effort where they pull together 10, 15 experts in this space, essentially lock them in a room at a hotel for a week, and they all work together to actually write the book in 1 week, pulling from their collective experience. And these are from practitioners. And the book is intended to be a handbook for government officials, for private sector, for development partners, anybody who might want to review some of the key principles that have been gleaned around one of these topics by practitioners. We've heard that there are individuals who are actually conducting courses with these books, which is great. We want them to be used, and we are looking to do more in the future. It's just one way that we can contribute to the growing knowledge or understanding about how to do this kind of work on the continent in order to advance access to electricity. Now, with regard to CEFA, and CEFA was involved in this latest update, which is another example of our close collaboration with the CEFA Fund and also the African Development Bank, with whom we've had a great relationship over a number of years. CEFA really symbolizes what Power Africa is all about. We are, at our heart, focused on enabling the private sector, on helping the private sector be the engine across Africa to increase generation capacity, to increase access to electricity. And if the private sector can be successful, then the whole sector is going to be better off. And so CEFA is one of those avenues where we can put some public financing into it, we can put some investment into it, that then will help to get the wheels turning, get the flywheel moving, so that projects can get done that wouldn't otherwise be able to progress. In the form of the different interventions that the VP talked about earlier in terms of junior equity, in terms of guarantees, in terms of lending. In fact, just this last week, we were reviewing some proposed projects, one in the Sahel that involves a reimbursable grant that is going to hopefully unlock some significant investment there for an individual developer. Another one in a country in East Africa that is going to be supporting a bank to increase their lending capacity. And so these are the types of projects that really need to be done, and CEFA plays a special role in making that happen. In fact, I'm pleased we have been contributing over the years. I think we've contributed around $26 million in total to CEFA over the years as a catalyst for attracting other capital. We're going to continue to invest. We're looking at another at least $2.5 million next year, and if we find more, maybe more. But it's an important vehicle, and we want to see it continue. And I guess I'll leave it there for now. If we have a chance to come back, I'll have a few other thoughts. Thanks.
Sure. No, thanks very much, Richard, and indeed a great partnership over the years. We very much also appreciate that there will be some additional funding coming from the US side that will help to increase our firepower to do more of the pipeline that Joao alluded to that is quite significant over the next couple of years. Kenyon, let me bring you back in just very briefly, because obviously talking about project finance structures in the energy sector, particularly IPPs, you cannot avoid sort of talking about off-taker risk. And maybe also from the work that you've done on the handbook, you can sort of give sort of a little bit of perspective of how those off-taker structures have sort of evolved over the last couple of years. And also, you know, how sort of some of those risks sort of have been sort of successfully mitigated by bringing in a blended finance, for example, in the conversation. So, Kenyon, please.
Sure. No, thank you. Is this on? Thank you. So, thank you for that. Yes, just as there really has been a diversity of lenders that has grown, you know, since 2016 when the first edition came out. There's also been an expansion and a diversity of off-takers and of off-take arrangements. And I looked back at the first edition of this, and we had all of one paragraph on alternative off-take arrangements. This edition has an entire chapter that looks at that. And really, today, much of the, many of the offtake arrangements are still as they were, say, a decade ago, which is to say it is a state-owned or state-backed utility that is looking to bring more electrons onto the grid. And ultimately, over the last decade, that has been quite an achievement to anchor billions of dollars of investment and bring additional electrons and expand energy access. What's changed, of course, is the sovereign debt environment. and this increased urgency for not just new energy, but low carbon alternatives. And so what we profile in this book and what we look at are options and new offtake arrangements that involve, for example, privately owned utilities. We look at corporate power purchase agreements, corporate offtake arrangements, single or in a collective. We look at power pools. So one of the examples that I know João brought up, and I forget if we profile this in the book as well, is the Zambia and going into the South Africa power pool. And so looking at these different offtake arrangements, what are, to understand, and this is to my colleague Richard's point, the point of these books is to demystify, right, and to empower. So going into it and understanding what is the credit risk, or the foreign exchange risk, or the legal regulatory risk, or the transmission risks, and how can those be mitigated if you're looking at a corporate power purchase agreement, a corporate arrangement where it is companies, private companies, off-taking that. And here's where I feel like really SEFA and these new lending, blended finance arrangements are so catalytic and exciting and are also detailed, which is to show how that combination, you can get a lot of complexity, right, when you have these offtake arrangements that maybe not necessarily are more creditworthy buyers, but you need lenders to step in and you need alternative sources to step in and to say, we can find the solution that uses some of this concessional financing or junior equity or grants. And we understand now, we can understand what those risks are and then also meet them and bring the cost of capital down so that the private financing is ready to go. So I hope that's just a brief, so thank you. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you, Kenny. And you mentioned private sector, so let's bring in a private sector voice. Clemens, you've been really very much at the forefront of particularly these blended finance conversations over the last number of years, and obviously we have a number of collaborative efforts. Maybe you could sort of give your perspective, sort of role of blended finance, sort of the evolution that you're seeing, and maybe sort of the one or other example on which we've been working together, and also with SEFA particularly.
Absolutely. So we have been a recipient of SEFA money for many years, and so I wanted to give you a few examples of how that has impacted what we do and the overall landscape that we work in. Yeah, so we want, ultimately what we need is we need capital in large amounts, we need capital that's affordable, and we need capital that's willing to take risks. Yeah, and all of those three components we've been able to put in motion thanks to SEFA and other blended finance providers. To put it into sort of a global context, yeah, we manage $1.2 billion, focusing on Africa across a number of strategies, but the majority is for renewable energy, and all that money is only available because we have the support from SEFA and others who provide first loss financing for our funds, which has ultimately catalyzed a large amount of money. Yeah, we have also, because of the efficiency of our capital structure, been able to bring our financing costs down over the last 5 years, partly in response to rising interest rates. So when we would have transacted 4 or 5 years ago at 5–6% above a base rate, those rates have now come down by 1.5% to 2%, and we're doing deals at 4 to 5% over the base rate, which is directly attributable to the blended finance structures that we've put in place. And if you speak to project developers, they will confirm to you that the cost of financing is an absolutely essential part of making these projects viable. And then there's the question of how does this leverage more capital and how does it encourage innovation? Yeah, and it's amazing how, with the facilities that we manage that are blended finance supported, we have been given a license to go into areas that others don't go into. So I want to give 2 examples, which are quite topical because they showcase this quite well. So the first one is, we invest a lot in commercial and industrial renewable energy solution providers across all of Africa, and I want to name one of them who we have, it's Cross-Boundary Energy, who we have provided a construction facility relatively early in their life to allow them to gain critical mass. This was at a time when they had no access to commercial funding and also not really access to other development finance solutions given the early stage of their business. Fast forward, 2 years in, we managed to bring Standard Bank on as a co-lender in this construction facility, and ultimately, just a couple of days ago, this construction facility was taken out by a $140 million syndicated loan facility led by Standard Bank, that includes the Facility for Energy Inclusion and other lenders, at a pricing that is extremely competitive. So you have a great story of a company that's innovative, that goes out there, tries to bring energy solutions to parts of Africa that don't have any, and ultimately moving them into the mainstream and allowing them to access commercial funding. The second example I want to mention is one that also showcases our ability with blended finance to be innovative and to push the boundaries, and that relates to Bern, who we will hear more from in just a while. There's an entire world of carbon finance that is emerging. It's a very confusing market for very many reasons, and one that requires one to take a long-term view on whether this world is indeed moving to a lower carbon future, which we passionately believe in, and then an ability to structure facilities that move away from traditional project financing. And Joao was talking about a carbon finance facility that they're looking at putting in place with Bern. We have done one, probably the first one done by a commercial lender about a bit over a year ago. And what this facility has done, it has forced us to learn about financing of a essentially new asset class that has immense potential, and basically chart a path forward that others can build on. We have learned a lot since. We have done a few other facilities since we did the first one. I think the market around us has learned a lot about how to finance carbon projects. There are lots of issues that still need to be resolved. But if you don't get started somewhere, you will never be asked the difficult questions, and the answers to those questions will not materialize. So we think of blended finance just as a way to get cost of capital down, but it does a lot more. And I think that's the critical point. It does open up avenues to new deals, new companies, new business models that otherwise wouldn't see the light of day.
Thank you very much, Clemens, and good sort of that you highlight some concrete examples, and we'll be talking a bit more about the carbon pre-finance when we have the presentation from Bern. We are quite pressed for time, but if we could just have one last quick round, if you could make one recommendation. We are talking in the MDB context around getting bigger, better, and bolder. If you would apply that to CEFA, what is sort of your one recommendation that you make? So just 10 seconds, a brief intervention from everyone with one concrete recommendation. Maybe we'll start with you, Richard.
Okay. I'll say TA to help companies actually access the facility, and I'm going to quickly add that we also need to be very cognizant of being complementary to the between the private sector and the DFIs that are often involved in the structures of these organizations, so that we're not inadvertently squeezing out private sources of capital and replacing them with really uncompetitive DFI financing. So we need to be very cognizant about that.
Thank you. Clemens?
So my addition to this is, and some of this CEF already does, is to focus really very much on supporting sectors and projects through the life cycle. Nothing goes a straight line on the African continent, and there are ups and downs, and being able to stick with initiatives even when the going gets tough is invaluable in ensuring that past gains don't get lost and we don't have to restart the clock.
Fantastic. Kenyon?
Well, staying on, I guess, my theme of you know, demystifying, I guess one thought to continue what SAFE is doing, and that is to really showcase the projects and looking at them, you know, some years from now, and essentially, how did it work? Sometimes even the not so successful projects, we learn a lot from where it doesn't work out and why, where are the pain points and how those were overcome. So I would just say, you know, if and hopefully if there is a third edition of this, it's largely a kind of synthesis and reflection on, you know, what we've learned in SAFA in the years ahead.
Fantastic, thank you. Maud, you have the final word.
Thank you. I would say that what is very important is to continue to work together, all the partners, CEFA, ALSF, Power Africa, CLDP. I think this book, it's a very good example of what we can do all together, and it is important to find ways to leverage on our expertise, on each of one expertise, work, experience, and I think we can do much more for successful projects in Africa. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for those concrete recommendations. A big round of applause for this first panel, please. Thank you very much. Let me move right away because we really want to move to some of the transactions, invite the next three panelists to join me here on the podium. First of all, Rachel Moore-Oshidi, who's the CEO of ARM Harith Infrastructure Investment. Rachel, please. Secondly, Christopher Flavin, who's the co-CEO, no, it's not Christopher, okay, David Anson from Critworks. And third, Meredith Mutoni, who's the head of electric finance at Burn Clean Cooking Manufacturing. Fantastic, and I see we have some demonstration here right away. So without any further ado, let me invite Rachel to present briefly the ARM Harith Climate Transition Fund, and we will then sort of open also for questions and comments from the audience. Rachel, you have the floor. Wherever you prefer, you can come up here if that's easier because the remote control is up here.
Thank you, Daniel. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and present to you the ARM Harith Equity Infrastructure Fund based out of Lagos, Nigeria, with a focus on infrastructure across various vertical, energy, transport, and ICT. My name is Rachel Moore-Oshodi, as mentioned, and I'm the Managing Director and CEO of ARM Harith. So we are a team of about 11 with a collective experience of 80 years developing, operating, and exiting infrastructure assets across the region. We're focusing on West Africa, even though we opportunistically look at projects outside of the region. And we were the first registered equity infra fund in Nigeria. It was over a decade ago, and we had the benefit of having the support from the AFDB, which was essential in attracting local partners, local pension funds, which were, it was the first time that they were entering this asset class. So we are a multi-vehicle blended finance fund where we are able to attract not only local investors, but also global investors. And that's the innovation of our structure. This is a snapshot of our portfolio investments. So we were able to sustain, first of all, invest in large-scale and mid-scale projects across the verticals that I mentioned earlier, partnering with a lot of DFIs, not just on the equity side, but also on the debt side. And we've been able to sustain returns in spite of the market we know that we operate in that are very challenging and volatile. And I want to mention that this is not luck, but it is strategy. It is one where we are targeting a certain level of return based on the opportunities that we see and in spite of the volatility in our market, because we factor that in and we tackle them head on from the beginning, so we are not surprised when they occur. As you see here, we've been in the transport, as I mentioned, in the energy sector, and most recently, thanks to technical assistance that we received from CEFA, we have been able to set up platforms that enable us to build mini-grids in peri-urban and rural areas in spite of the challenge on making it viable. And it's a testament of the importance of this work that CEFA does in our region. A snapshot of our returns, as I was mentioning, the narrative that Africa is risky, it is indeed true, and we all know the risk that we're facing from FX volatility, from change in regime, regulation, etc. But again, when you look at those risks in the right hands, with the right team and the right experience, you're actually converting those risks into opportunities, because we know that's the flip side of the coin. And so we've been able to deliver as at last year. You would see that our multiple in terms of invested capital was 1.6, and our current IRR is 17%. We superseding and exceeding the returns at the Africa level, at the emerging Europe level, and in Latin America. So this is how we actually ensuring that in spite of investing equity, we are still providing a 2x return. And if you've seen the slide before, we've been able to do that pretty much in all our portfolio but one. You always have to have one that would not perform as you want it to be, but we're learning the lessons from that to be applied again in the next set of projects. This is a very comprehensive risk management strategy that we have from the onset. We will not go into any project without having mastered this. And this is the team executing, without which we would not be able to do that. Because again, that coin that Africa represents, with on one side the risk and on the other side the opportunity, could really turn into a profitable investment when you have the right team, when that coin is in the right hands. So I'm not going to go into detail into that, but I want to say that based on the lessons that we've learned from the first fund and building on the momentum and the success of the first fund, we're currently raising our successor fund. And I'm pleased to say that, again, thanks to the support of CEFA, we are able to bring back the same local pension funds who have bet on us from the onset, coming back with more commitment, thanks to junior capital that CEFA is contemplating providing to us. And this is significant because in an environment where the infrastructure gap is huge, having that kind of long-term patient capital is really critical. And without the help of CEFA, we would not be able to mobilize the quantum that is needed. The successor fund aligning with CEFA mission is still on infrastructure, but is based on climate resilient, sustainable cities, and energy transition outcomes. So we have the opportunity to tackle this. I'm not going to go into the numbers. We all know what opportunities are presented by the African continent going forward. It's really the last frontier of potential growth. And again, we are focusing on tackling these issues, which for us are opportunities to ensure that the successor fund will be even more successful than the first. This is represented, again, our structure. We're going with the same format as with the existing funds, whereby we're mobilizing local financing in Nigeria, coupled with international financing in the Mauritius Fund. Where you see the junior capital, this is where CEFA comes in. We also have other partners providing additional junior capital, enabling us to be able to do what we do best in a manner that is sustainable and catalytic for the market. I want to mention that this has never been done. So again, CEFA has enabled us to innovate, to be able to bring that structure in place and attract both local and international financing. This is the ask. So we are, as you see on the Nigerian vehicle, we are raising the equivalent of 50 million equivalent. On the USD vehicle, an equivalent of 30 million. And then on the Mauritius vehicle, 120 million. Again, based on the current performance, we believe that we can deliver an 18% return USD, 27% in local currency. It's a 12-year fund, 5-year investment period. And so we are open for business to ensure that not only we transform the economies and provide the energy access and other critical infrastructure to the communities that we serve, as well as, of course, delivering profitable returns. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Big round of applause for Rachel. A very clear presentation, and I think a great and exciting opportunity. I would like to ask those that would like to ask a question or make a comment to hold your thoughts. We're a little bit time constrained, so what I propose is we do the other two presentations as well, then we open the floor for questions, comments, which you can direct to either of the three presenters of the opportunities. So having said that, let me invite the colleagues from Moye Power to talk about an exciting microgrid project in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which has also been quite some time in the making, so we're really excited, hopefully next year, to bring it to financial close. So you have the floor.
Thank you, Daniel, and thanks for CEFA for putting this forum together for us. So the Moye Power project is a consortium of 3 companies, GridWorks, Aeronov, and AEE. So we'll get straight into the presentation because I have a timer running. Obviously, I've got a lot of detail here. I'm not going to go through everything. This is to give you an overview. We've got 10 minutes and 7 slides to talk through. But that shows you the location of the 3 projects in the DRC. In the northwest, there's Gemena. On the top of the Congo River, there's Bumba. And in the northeast, there's Isiru. Just a little bit of background on how Moye Power came into existence. So the government of Congo ran a tender, the Ministry of Hydraulic Resources and Electricity, coordinated by their coordinating committee called UCM. FCDO provided money for fillet and linklaters to put together an international tender, and that was called the ESSOR tender. And the consortium of GridWorks, Aeronov, and AEE Power were the winning bidder for that. It's a project of national importance, which means it's regulated centrally, not provincially. And we have a detailed concession contract setting out the regulation for the projects, regulation of the tariff. We've got international standard KPIs set out in the concession, which are pretty tough, and we have an obligation to serve in the 3 cities. The overall investment over 20 years is about $350 million. I mentioned the 3 companies. GridWorks is wholly owned by BII. Aeronov, I think most of you know, they operate CIE in Cote d'Ivoire, and AE Power is a Spanish construction company which is Pan-African, and they've been established in Congo for over 25 years. So the project has been going for a while, as Daniel said. The last year with elections in DRC was a bit challenging and things didn't go particularly quickly, but we think it's now back on track. New minister's in place, he's staffed up the coordinating committee, and we're working with them. So the feasibility studies were started as soon as we signed the concession agreement. So we won the contract in end of December 2020. The concession contracts were signed. The concession contract for the exclusive rights in each of the 3 cities was signed in June 2021, and we started the feasibility studies at that time. So the logistics of doing feasibility studies in North Congo is not particularly easy. But we did a detailed study of the current energy use in each of the 3 cities. That was questionnaire of 700 households and SMEs in each city with 200 questions. So you can do the math on the number of data points we have on the existing demand, and obviously these utilities are set out to meet the future demand. But the base case is looking at the existing demand and how demand will increase. So we completed the studies mid-2023 and were given to the government and their independent engineer. We encountered those delays we mentioned earlier on, but they have now back on track. Their international engineer, it's Artelia, the French engineering company, are reviewing the technical and cost proposals that we have made to the government. And we were hoping to review that with the government this year, but that slid a little bit. It'll now be Q1 next year. And that's when we'll sit down with the government and the potential financiers, talk about indicative tariff and what's affordable and acceptable in these three cities. We have been working with the major financial institutions in this space. Obviously, AIF24 and CEFA have been front and center. They submitted a letter of expression of interest in the original tender period. We've been working with the PIDGE Group, Emerging Africa and TAF, and also the World Bank Group. The key thing we hope to get done this week is we hope to crystallize our involvement with AIF24 and sign a mandate letter with them to arrange the debt and coordinate the grant for this project. So that should really kick us off on the next stage of the process. What we are looking for, here's the ask up front, and we'll give it again at the end. We have been talking to a number of donors for the viability gap financing here. Obviously, to do projects in North Congo is not cheap, and any mini-grid requires some viability gap financing. We've been talking to a number of donors in the sector, including CEFA, including the PIDGE Group, and we had been doing quite a bit of work with GAP, but their financing capacity as of late appears to be somewhat diminished. So we're probably looking for 10 to 20 more million in viability gap financing to help unlock this catalytic investment in North Congo. The next slide is where things are today. This is probably the interesting one for people here. What are we going to do? So we expect to serve 1 million people by the end of 20 years of operation, so about 180,000, 200,000 connections. The existing demand, based on the studies we've done, is mainly residential, 70%. Most of it's after dark, means you need batteries. These are relatively agricultural cities. This is not Goma, this is not Kinshasa, this is not Bujubai. Our ARPU is relatively low. We hope to build that up through productive use stimulation, but at the moment it looks to be about $33 a client per month. The social tranche is the first layer of electricity, which comes with a 25% discount. That's 25% of the total demand. We have an obligation to provide free public lighting, well, public lighting paid by connected people, but no payment at the point of use. So each of these 3 towns will have public lighting. And the numbers I mentioned previously, the initial investment when we start is about $145 million. We look to expand our generation capacity about every 5 years, and that will build out to a total investment over the period of the concession of about $350 million. The grant number up front is relatively high as a percentage of the initial capital, looks to be about 30%, but as it's a one-time upfront grant, it's a capex buy down initially, and the whole raison d'etre for this appel d'offre, this call for tenders, is to do projects at scale with the grant up front that then have sufficient scale so their operating revenues will thereby cover their operating costs. So it's a one-time grant up front. So by the end of the project, the grant element should be somewhere between 10 to 50% of the overall project cost. Not going to get into the detail on that one, but it just does give you the quick breakdown on those numbers I just told you. Initial capital investment at the end of 5 years is about $150 million. Over the full 20 years, 350, and that gives you the breakdown on the grant, looking at about 30% on the first investment, but then falling to about 14%. In each of these cities, we are looking initially to have about 7 megawatts of PV, about 20 to 30 megawatt hours of battery storage, and about 3 to 4 megawatts of diesel. Going into some of the key points we're looking at now, as we said, the initial funding structure, years 1 to 5, $135 million. We hope that based upon our review with the independent engineer and the government, in Q1 next year, we will be able to kick off the financing process. That should be 12 to 18 months, and then thereafter there is about an 18-month build process, building the 3 facilities in parallel in each of these 3 cities. As we said previously, we've got very strong support from the financing groups, AFDB, CEFA, PIDGE, and the World Bank Group. CEFA has been looking to lead the effort as an MLA for MOI, which is great. We've been getting very positive feedback from the other multilateral development banks. We're kind of oversubscribed on debt, so the debt tranche is currently being utilized or kept aside for people who can provide viability gap financing. And there is a demand stimulation case that we are looking at with the World Bank, which could significantly increase the generating capacity. This is not an IPP, so demand cases, if you look at having a revenue guarantee for the demand case, you can upsize the size of the generating facility, and the increase in capital in the T&D network is not substantial. It's basically a fixed cost. So it can materially impact the price per kilowatt hour of the tariff to the end consumer if you can have this revenue protection layer for the first 5 years when demand is really unknown. One of the big unknowns here is we don't have a comparative of what happens to demand in a city that's off-grid and always will be, and what happens when you give them 24/7 power. How do industries grow? How does productive use grow? There's no comparative that we've found in the marketplace that we can look at to give us a thumbnail for what will happen to the demand when we provide 24/7 power to these cities. So having a revenue guarantee is really helpful. It protects the base case debt, and it gives us an opportunity to be less conservative in our demand predictions. So the viability gap needs are going well, but as we said, the GAP tranche looks less certain now, so we are looking for additional capacity there. And that combined with the World Bank demand guarantee could substantially increase the size of the generation and could substantially impact the price per kilowatt hour of the end consumer. It could bring that down 10, 15%. And just the final conclusions there. So providing 24/7 power, street lighting to 3 cities which currently have a population of 200,000 people. Initial connections about 30,000.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'd like to thank all of the participants for attending the second assembly of this important
Thank you very much.
today, and express my heartfelt gratitude.
Yeah, I guess that's a signal, yeah. That's my 10 minutes plus 10. So 3 cities, 200,000 people now, that will increase. Viability gap front will enable us to catalyze this investment. Potential demand guarantee we're talking about. Central regulation and concessions. Strong support from the major MDBs in this sector. And with this final VGF tranche, that will enable us to unlock this investment to provide electricity to these cities that will never have electricity. And the final shots are just, this is what it looks like on the ground. This is what it looks like when you electrify a city. This is Bumba on the north of the Congo, showing the grid layout. The white section is the generating facility. The rest is the grid that we will build. And Gemena in the northwest, that's the grid. That's what it will look like in a city of 200,000 people. And Isiro in the northeast, again, that's the grid that will serve a city of about 200,000 people. Thank you very much.
Okay, it's back. No, thank you very much for that presentation. I think it's very exciting to bring power to 3 large cities, in fact, that have not had access to electricity to date. Let me move right away to the last opportunity, moving to the aspect of access to clean cooking solutions, where in fact the situation is even more dire across the continent than on the access to electricity side. So Meredith, you have the floor, and I think we see a concrete induction stove here presentation live. I think we have to check whether from a security perspective we can turn it on, but you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. No, I won't be cooking. I just want to show you the stove. so it's safe. So it's such a privilege to be here to talk about the clean cooking projects we've been working on and how we've been financing them to make them possible. My name is Meredith Mudhoni, Head of Electric Finance at Burn Manufacturing, and we are the world's leading modern cook stove company. So while many of you spend a lot of your days busy managing portfolios, we spend our days busy making sure that women in Africa can cook their dinner with cleaner air, healthier lungs, and have happier lives. So I'll tell you a bit more about that. So we are the world's largest cooking company, as mentioned. We've done 5 million stoves across Africa. Right now, we make 250,000 stoves per month. We have 3,500 employees, and about 50% of them are women. So we are a vertically integrated company that also develops its own carbon projects. We do our own in-house design of the stoves. We make the stoves, and we have a team of about 2,000 sales agents that do door-to-door home deliveries of our cook stove products. In addition, we also develop the carbon projects, going from monitoring to issuance to even sales of the credits. So far we've sold more than 5 million, or issued rather more than 5 million credits, mainly within the voluntary markets. We have a suite and range of products ranging from improved cook stoves to electric stoves, LPG stoves, and recently introduced institutional stoves to focus on the needs for hospitals and schools. And our impact has been independently verified. So in terms of numbers, so far we've been able to impact 26 million lives, save 14 million tons of wood, reduce 25 million tons of carbon emissions from the environment, and generate more than $900 million in household savings. And they see the logos below. Those are some of the people that have given a rubber stamp on the impact that we've made so far. Digital monitoring and verification is at the heart of what we do for our carbon projects, just to make sure that they are of the highest integrity. And we have invested a lot in terms of developing in-house tools to do this across all our cooking products. So today I want to talk more about electric cooking. Many of you have invested so much in terms of billions of dollars and time to make sure that Africa has electricity. And now we could say 600 million people have access to electricity. And when you look at urban areas, 80% of the urban population has access to electricity. But the interesting thing, there's only less than 5% use it for cooking. And you'd find the main fuels that they are relying on are biomass fuels, and in some cases there is some LPG penetration, but that is still very low in most African countries. So what we did at Burn is to decide to make a stove that will bring electric cooking to African households. So you've put in all this investment. One challenge is people don't use enough of the electricity that's been put out there. And you put electric cooking in their home, you could easily double their electric consumption. I don't want to go into the details of that, but just to tell you a bit more about our stove, I have it here with me. You can look at it a bit later. Thanks. Thank you. So it's a cellular-enabled IoT stove. What that means is that we can track how much energy was used for cooking, and it has a SIM card and chip inside, so we could also operate on a pay-as-you-cook mechanism. So what this means, as a household, you pay a small upfront cost of maybe about $15, and then you make weekly payments for less than a year, and you fully own the stove. We also sell it with cookware because it's an induction stove, and not many households have induction-compatible cookware, so we've created a bundle for them. And because of the IoT capabilities, we're able to track and monitor the credits using gold standard metered methodology for cooking. I'll skip through that. So one thing I want to talk about a bit more is on carbon finance and why it is really essential for clean cooking. So this bundle that I've talked about would probably retail for about $150. But in a carbon project, we can subsidize this upfront and give it on to customers for $100, making it more affordable. And given that it's on a pay-as-you-cook module, they don't have to pay the full upfront cost. So they're able to pay slowly as they fully own the appliance over time. And one way that we do work with our carbon projects at Burn, so this is just a simple example and similar to what we've been doing with, what we are going to be doing with SAFER, is as an investor, if you give us $40 of funding, we'll put that into a carbon project, so we'll register a project, We'll make the stove. We'll put the stove in the customer's hands at the subsidized price. As the customer is using the stove, it's generating carbon credits. We then monetize these credits and use that to pay back the investor at a certain return. So with SAFER, what we would want to do is they're coming in as a sort of de-risking concessional capital to enable us to attract more commercial capital into such a similar structure. So they said, we won't charge you any interest. We'll give you sort of a SAFER fund to do this, and we'll be able to scale electric cooking in Africa. And one thing about Burn is that we really reinvest a lot of the incomes and revenues we earn from these programs. So we believe in the compounding effect of how we could transition more households to clean cooking. So whatever revenues we earn from the carbon projects are reinvested to do more stoves for more families, and the cycle goes on and on. So far, we have raised about $45 million in corporate debt. As of last month, actually in October, we signed on $15 million with the European Investment Bank just for electric cooking. In terms of grants, we have been awarded about $25 million of grants so far, and about 10 or 15 million of these has been going towards product research and setting up of operations to drive electric cooking in key markets we've identified. So our need today is mainly around corporate equity investment. Burn has not raised much equity in the past. We've really focused on reinvesting profits. We have raised about maybe $7 million of early seed stage capital, but now we're at the point where we need to really scale our electric operations. And in terms of the ask, what we're looking at is about $25 to $50 million of equity. A lot of this will go towards scaling our electric expansion across key markets we've identified, towards product and R&D for more and more advanced electric products, scale our tech and advancements in DMRV that we want to invest in, as well as capitalize and catalyze some of the carbon project investments we have in the pipeline that do need some equity. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. But one thing just to mention, these are two stories of Margaret and Mercy who made the switch to e-cooking and can justify and say that they've been able to earn an income's worth of 1 month of extra income just by changing the way that they cook. So I hope that you do consider investing in Burn, because we are the future of clean cooking.
Thank you so much, Meredith, for really a compelling presentation and a value proposition. I know that we are out of time, but I would like to open the floor at least for maybe 3 interventions. I think there's one person here in the second row on the right side. If we can just bring a microphone quickly. Someone can bring a microphone. And maybe just to see if there's 1 or 2 other interventions from the floor. Of course, all the partners here will be available through the remainder of the AIF, so you can also catch them in the corridors after the session. I know we're standing between you and a well-deserved lunch, but I wanted to give the audience a brief opportunity to come in. So I think there's one question here, the lady here in the second row.
Thank you very much. Habiba Ali from Sosei Renewable Energies Company, based in Abuja and Kaduna in Nigeria. I stand to speak about the SAFER fund. We've been engaging because we were lucky to have USTDA do a feasibility studies for us across 100 communities in Kogi, Kaduna, and Plateau states in Nigeria. And the resulting effect was that we have 64 ripe communities for funding. And we've been trying to engage with SAFER, but that is not going forward. I thought the last I heard was maybe they worked through organized financiers like ARM and cross-boundary. But seeing that Burn is here, I feel they also have opportunity to work directly with private sector, and I really would like to see how does that work. That's my first question. We've also been engaging with ARM Harriet, and that was when Tarier was there. It also trailed off because they were actually talking about this new financing tranche that you were expecting. So I want to see, is it that CEFA would like it if we work directly with ARM-Harriet while they fund ARM-Harriet in that aspect, and how do we make this happen? Also, is there a possibility maybe working with the direct state governments that are involved, that we have the sites in now, to come to CEFA? How do we get CEFA to fund some of this 64 mini grids of an average of 150 kilowatt per site? Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for this concrete question. Let me just see if we have one more intervention or question from the floor. I don't see any hand at the moment. So maybe let me just bring this question to the panel. I think there was a reference to ARM-Harriet. There was a reference also to Bern. So Rachel, Meredith, if you want maybe to come in very briefly, just to say that from the CEFA side, hey, we are happy to continue the conversation around possibilities for a direct intervention from CEFA, but we're also very much operating through intermediaries such as ARM-Harriet or kind of platforms such as cross-boundary that you mentioned in the mini-grid space. So we kind of do both, and sometimes it's easier sort of that you engage with some of those intermediated platforms that are sort of focused on a particular topic. But Rachel, if you wanted to come in just very briefly.
So thank you very much for the question. We indeed have in our distributed renewable energy platform a number of projects that we are looking at. Currently, we have 9 mini grids, 7 currently operating, 2 still under construction, and we have a pipeline of over 125 mini grids that we're looking at. So we'll be happy to engage and see which communities are ready, because it's a platform that we intend to scale quite aggressively and have very high ambition for that, and linked to not only providing first access to those communities also comes, the scale and ability to bundle it in a manner that makes sense, and potentially if the grid comes to be sustainable. So we need to see specifically where those communities are, because we're very strategic about how we integrate them into the platform, but happy to have that conversation. Thank you.
Fantastic. Meredith?
Yeah, and for us, really, the scale of what we could do, especially within that carbon project structure, is immense. I did mention that right now we do produce about 250,000 stoves a month, but we're not at capacity. At capacity, our existing facilities can make close to 500,000 stoves every month. So that's about 6 million cook stoves. So in terms of carbon project financing, we see the need to push those stoves in the market at about $100 million or more every year. So the bucket is quite big. We're not there yet. The need in Africa is immense. So we're always open to all types of investment opportunities that come across.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Would really like to thank, first of all, the panel for the excellent presentation of those investment opportunities, encouraging you to continue the conversations in the corridors. Please give a big round of applause to the panel for these presentations. And I know we're already over time, so I won't take a long time for conclusions. I think we have seen in this session sort of the power and the role of blended finance, the importance of instruments such as CEFA in kind of closing some of those viability gaps. We're really grateful to the partners that are supporting us. We would like to invite others to join us on this journey. And hopefully next year when we come back to AIF, we can sort of demonstrate some success stories based on the projects that we presented today, but also showcase sort of the next type of opportunities for the next couple of years. So thank you very much, everyone. Please enjoy lunch. It's been a pleasure.